All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 4 of Culture Calls, Dialing into the Future, where we discuss everything on culture. Today, we are in conversation with Mohandas Menon. Mr. Menon is a renowned organizational development and HR leader with a long history of being a leader in the business. Since 2007, Mr. Mohan has had the privilege of coaching a number of senior executives, including people at the CEO and CXO level in well known Indian organizations, Fortune 500 MNCs, and SMEs. He's the co-founder and managing director at Greenfern Leadership and Strategic Consulting Private Limited, president, where he advises companies on M&A strategies, building business engagements, facilitating, advising, and coaching leaders with strategic planning. He's also currently working as a strategic director at Ayurved India Limited, formerly known as Dabur Ayurved. An absolute delight to have you on our show, Mr. Mohan. It's an absolute delight to have you on our show.
So Thank you so much.
I think we can just start off. I'm a big fan of all the work that you've done, and I see you a lot of times in news. So if you could just tell us a bit about to the audience that we have a bit about yourself and the current role and the projects that you're pursuing right now.
Thanks, Suman. Thanks for that introduction. I don't know how much of that I deserve, but in any case, so a quick background. I manage a couple of companies, as you mentioned, Greenfern Leadership and Strategic Consulting, where this is a boutique strategy advisory company where we work closely with company boards and the CEOs. We look at strategy across the organization, and we focus a lot on organizational change, leadership effectiveness. We also do some boutique merger and acquisition advisory. We do financial valuations as well for companies in India, as well as portfolio managers in the GCC and Europe and places like that. I also manage as the president and director strategic projects. I manage 30-year-old herbal animal healthcare company, Ayurved Limited. Ayurved used to be a Dabur company. It used to be called Dabur Ayurved, but it was spun off as an independent organization outside the Dabur fold some years ago. Ayurved basically looks at enhancing animal health through purely herbal and Ayurvedic formulations. So traditional knowledge and modern research, what goes in together. I took charge of this company about 18 months back with the mandate to build it to strategic new orbit, and that's what I'm doing. That's what we're all doing together as a team, which obviously involves business, strategy. It involves organizational change and looking at how we can do things differently. Besides which, also an executive coach, as you said. So I've been coaching for about 14, 15 years now across the CEO, CXO, C-suite, partners, the big four, and other decision makers. I'm also a negotiation coach. I specialize in coaching negotiations besides just, the wider gamut of executive coaching. I have clients in India and overseas as well. So that's about it. I used to be a banker for about 20 odd years, for the first 20 years of my working life, both commercial banking and merchant banking. And then I moved into more of organizational development and roles related to that. I worked with Reliance Retail, I worked with Bharti Resources, and then about 12 years ago, I set up Greenfern along with Jagdish Kinney, who was earlier the ED and CEO of Airtel.
Considering the long history that you have right now, dealing with people and dealing with companies a lot, I think you must have seen that there is a long change in trends from when you started working to where it is now. So how do you see work culture evolving? So especially in a hybrid workplace, which is, kind of here to stay at this moment. How do you see that work culture has evolved, and how do you see it evolving in the future as well?
Well, I think there are two parts to that question. You mentioned the hybrid workplace, and I'm really wondering whether the hybrid workplace is really here to stay. I know a lot of people say it is, and therefore, we have to evolve, and organizational culture has to evolve to match these changes. But the thought behind this, the whole idea of the hybrid workplace is that it's because of the current pandemic which has caused it. But I'm wondering, is it because of the current pandemic, or was the pandemic just a catalyst that allowed us to experiment and actually see that we can, possibly relook at the paradigms, that with which we work, and the paradigms that we've become used to so far. So if you look at it, even before the pandemic, there was a large gig economy which was building up, and we were getting used to it. And it was, something because of the fact that people wanted the flexibility of not having to go out to do mundane tasks, and others needed the flexibility or wanted the flexibility of various different kinds of work options. So what I'm getting at is that the move to a different set of parameters for work is generational and evolutionary rather than caused by a health crisis. And with social interaction and experiences moving more and more to the online reality, we would anyway have been forced to start looking at, how our working spaces and our working cultures need to move beyond the traditional ones. So if you look at it from that perspective, then the question of how work culture will evolve becomes both interesting as well as challenging and complex. So some of the changes that I think we will need to consider and look at are that I believe that there is going to be an end to the command and control structure. This is an industrial age medieval construct which will see a constant change over the next couple of working generations. It's not only the fact that today's global economy, the global economy is causing organizations to move away from the command and control structure, but there is a pushback against the kind of compensation levels, the massive disparities in compensation levels, which will also push us towards this breakdown in the command and control structure. So anyone managing culture in organizations will need to keep this fact in mind. Further, we will also need to consider the fact that there are a lot of our work will move from the physical space to the intellectual space. With more and more routine tasks becoming automated, with machine learning and AI making massive strides, we will actually need to provide intellectual spaces, both physical and virtual intellectual workspaces, that foster thinking and innovation. So any thoughts of how work culture is evolving will actually need to factor in these elements as well. I think another change that we will see is that teams will get more diverse and inclusive. With physical, locational challenges breaking down and therefore creating true hybrid workplaces, occasioned not purely by pandemic, but by technology creating the opportunities to acquire and use talent from anywhere in the world, we are actually moving to truly hybrid workplaces. As I said, not purely because of the pandemic causing it. So with this, we'll need to look at cross-cultural workplace culture dynamics. You could argue that these paradigms already exist in large, globally diverse MNCs. Agreed, but I'm also looking here at organizations which don't necessarily have physical locations in many different geographies, but use or will use the services of people in geographically diverse locations and integrate them as core parts of multifaceted workforces. So yes, hybrid workforces are here to stay. Hybrid workplaces are here to stay, but not necessarily purely as a fallout of the pandemic. This is what I'm trying to emphasize on, which we constantly say that hybrid workplaces because of the pandemic. I'm saying it's not because of that. It was anyway evolving towards this. Evolving towards it because of generational, technological, and mindset changes.
Right.
So, which is why when we look at answering this question, how workplace culture is evolving or has evolved over the years that I've been in the workplace for 42 years now, I think. We should avoid the trap of believing it's because of a pandemic, but understand that it's because of evolution. Evolution in technology, in human needs, wants, desires, in changes in generational expectations and generational aspirations. and in more aware, empowered, and connected human sapiens. So cultural change will no longer be content with a no, will no longer be content with a slow progression across years through an initial organizational climate change and really, I mean, then moving into more sustained cultural change. I think organizational cultural change will need to be much more dynamic than it has been earlier. It needs to continually evolve, keeping pace with the speed at which the rest of the world is changing. I think Jack Welch possibly is the one who said that something about if the internal rate of change is slower than the external rate of change, you're headed for bankruptcy, my friend, or something on those lines. So it's the same with culture. If organizational culture does not keep pace with the change in our environment, in technology, in the way the human race itself is evolving, I think our evolution over the past few generations has been much faster than in generations earlier. And therefore, these are things that we need to keep in mind when we look at change in culture. And I'll just end with, trying to recall, the three forces of culture in any organization as spelled out by Robbins and Coulter: selection, top management, and socialization. So if I look at only at socialization, while we can expect selection and top management also to change, but if you look at only socialization, there will be a dramatic change in all the aspects of socialization. And these aspects, as again listed out by in Coulter's work, were rituals and routines, symbols, language, organizational structures, control systems, power structures, and organizational paradigms. All these will change because of the way technology has changed. All these will change because of the way workforces and workplaces will change. So culture will definitely be dynamic, much more dynamic. Cultural change will be definitely much more dynamic than it has been in the past, is the way I think I would sum it up.
I really love that you took the perspective from understanding organizational culture from everything, be it from the point of evolution to the changes in technology, to the adaptation of AI, to big learning, to big data, and how all of this has already trickled down, and just the pandemic was just a small trigger which led to this. So
Absolutely. It was a catalyst, I feel.
exactly. So I think that perspective is far more bigger than what most people are thinking right now. And also the thing that you told on Jack Welch, I think once Jack Welch also said this thing that the soft stuff is the hard stuff in a company. So the culture is literally what is one of the things which is considered very soft, but it is something that which is very hard for leaders to define in a company. So I just want to, continue on that. So how true is this, for you when it comes to workplace culture within your organization? So how do you think culture is, being set in all the companies that you're working in right now?
How is culture set? Can I, you talked about the soft stuff in the hard stuff. I think that's what Jack Welch
Right.
said. Yeah. So well, actually, anything that Jack Welch has written about, or said, there's a lot that's written about by various different people. But I have, see, basically, what does he mean by, the soft stuff in the hard stuff? The hard stuff, as I understand it, is the technological backends that we use, and the soft stuff is the people part of it. So if you look at it from there, technology is easy to change. It may be expensive. It may require, people to be retrained and reskilled and things like that. But that's relatively easier than getting people themselves to change their mindsets, or getting the people side of the change equation to actually change. That is important, and that is not easy. So you can bring in technology into an organization. You can spend a lot of money and a lot of time and effort putting it in, but if the soft stuff, if the people themselves don't adapt to it and don't change, that's when you will have problems. Now, earlier I think we talked about the three forces of change, that is selection, top management, and socialization. So if you look at those again in this aspect, in the soft aspect, all of these would need to change. All of these would, and getting all of them to change at any point of time is not very easy.
So I just want to know how true is the statement, the soft stuff is the hard stuff in the workplace culture within your own organization.
Yeah.
So how
so
does
it's
it?
very true.
Right.
Yeah. So that's right. Very true. So in our own organization, in Ayurved, the herbal animal healthcare company that I run, we are going in for a massive change in our technology and systems. We're upgrading a lot of things. We're trying to bring in a lot of, as organizations grow over the years, there is a lot of siloization that happens. It happens across all organizations, I mean, and everywhere. And every few years, you've got to figure out how to break the silos down, how to get people to talk to each other, how to make different departments communicate more effectively, and things like that. So we're doing that. We're integrating a lot of our systems. We're upgrading a lot of our systems. We're looking at data and data analysis and business intelligence and how we utilize all of these for the growth of the organization. So, identifying the kind of systems that we need, identifying the kind of technological changes that we need, that are maybe time consuming, but they are not very difficult as far as, in comparison to now getting people themselves to change. Because humans, as we all know, notoriously, most of us are averse to change. And many of us have problem with ambiguity. So when you look at Jack Welch's statement, yes, the hard stuff, getting the technology right, getting the technology in place, upgrading your systems, changing your platforms, porting your data, ensuring that everything is accurate and right. Those are, there are processes which are well defined and which can be utilized to do all of this. But actually getting people to understand that, hey, listen, what you've been doing for the past 15 years, the past 20 years, you've been doing it and you've been relatively successful, or you feel you've been relatively successful when you look at your own growth internally. But when you look at the rest of the world and how the world is changing, now getting that thought into people's heads is not very easy. That is a huge challenge. So rewiring the technology is not so difficult. Rewiring the human brain or the human thinking, that is difficult. And actually, that's also, that's very something which has been of great interest to me, because as a coach, so one of the areas that I've been trained in as a coach is neurosciences, or how the brain works, and emotional intelligence is another area of study, and where I'm also certified as well, and which I use in my coaching, both of these. So we can actually rewire the way we think. Okay, there are ways of doing that, and we can relook at ourselves from an emotional maturity, emotional quotient, emotional intelligence perspective, and how we can be more emotionally mature. So when it comes down to something like the question that you asked about how difficult is it to get the soft part right compared to the hard part, I think it's all about getting getting the people part of the change equation right. Is all about participation, creating excitement, creating engagement, and creating a buy-in. And these are, I think, necessary for successful change. And I'm reminded of what, as I said, there's a lot that has been written about this particular statement of Jack Welch about the soft stuff and the hard stuff. I actually tend to like something that Stephen Covey had mentioned in the third alternative. And in the third alternative approach, basically he talks about, again, it's about emotional intelligence. I see myself. So I see myself, I know who I am, done a deep dive, a deep analysis into myself, and I've listened to other people about who I am. And therefore I understand myself. I am trying to understand myself very clearly. I see you. I look at you objectively, non-judgmentally. I try to understand who you are, and then I seek you out. I understand that there are differences between you and me, differences between the way you and I will approach particular set of stimuli, how you will react or respond, and how I will react or respond. And therefore, when we look at the soft stuff, how do we integrate or how do we create that desire to change or that need to change in the soft part, that is the human part of the organization? It's all a matter of getting the right emotional climate, the right emotional culture, since we're talking about organizational culture. And as I said earlier, getting the right levels of engagement, excitement, participation and buy-in. And it's not easy, but it can be done. It can be done going back to what Stephen Covey said, understanding how different stimuli affect each of us. And therefore, as managers and as change managers, working with those stimuli, working after understanding who we are, what the organization is, and what the people in the organization are all about, and then trying to put those pieces together and making that change.
Right. I think that was a really good comprehensive statement of how you told all the success factors that go into making the soft stuff really important, and also not ignoring the hard stuff. I think I really like that. And if I had to double down on that, if you had to like give away a few tips, so what do you think what are the success tips do you think that everyone should take to become an employer of choice of the people? What do you think are the roots of success, to become an employer of choice?
Employer of choice. Okay, now that's a difficult one because I think for each of us, the question of who an employer of choice is different. It would be very subjective. I'm not a hardcore HR person, although I've started my career in banking, financial services, managed the P&L of financial services company, then moved into organizational development, set up a company of my own, which I sold, to a European conglomerate, went back to corporate life, as I said, and then now for the past so many years in advisory and similar roles. So when you look at who is an employer of choice, if I looked at each stage of my career as a banker, then as a merchant banker, then as an entrepreneur, and then as someone who decided to sell the company and therefore had to look at the people within the organization and how they need to be managed and handled, then worked for very large conglomerates at fairly senior levels, and then advisory, and have advised a large number of organizations as an executive coach. And now, as I said, I manage a couple of companies too. When I look at all of these, and if I look at what would an employer of choice mean in two contexts, to people who work in those organizations, and to me at different stages of my working life cycle. So at different stages of my working life cycle, employer of choice means something different. When I started off, it would mean an organization which gave me to me, and this is personal, for somebody else, it may be something very different. It meant giving me the opportunity to learn and grow. It meant giving me the opportunity to travel, to see different, experience different things, to learn across but when you grow, as you go further down the line, and today for me, I no longer am necessarily an employee, but I'm a person who employs others. And that's what we as an organization, we hire people. So if I look at it from across this, at different stages, an employer of choice means something different. Now, to me today, managing company with about almost 300 people and about 100 crores of revenue across India and 15 other countries where we operate, but in a very, very niche market, what would it mean to be an employer of choice? It would mean a company where people are trusted, where people feel respected, where people's voices are heard, where decision making is allowed and empowered at every level, depending upon what the roles are. It would mean not necessarily being the highest paying employer, in the sense in the top maybe 3 percentile or 4 percentile, but a well-paying employer who also is empathetic and looks after the people in the organization, At the same time, understanding looking after people in the organization also means that it should not be something personality driven, in the sense that not out of favoritism, but looking after people from an organizational, healthy and sound perspective. So that would what, and giving people the opportunity to grow, giving people the opportunity to be creative, innovative, giving people the opportunity to reinvent themselves. And this is a term I use very often. I believe that we all have to reinvent ourselves every few years, because the world is changing so fast. And unless we reinvent ourselves every now and then, so give people actually get left behind. Going back to Jack Welch's quote of, if the internal rate of change is less than the external rate of change, you're headed for bankruptcy. So we need to ensure that we don't run bankrupt of ideas, bankrupt of thought, bankrupt. We should ensure that we are never bankrupt of being bankrupt of relevance. In the sense, we have to continuously stay relevant. As a human being, as a functioning human being, you've got to continuously be relevant to something or somebody, at least to yourself. So I don't know, I think I got very philosophical about that question of yours, employer of choice. I mean, I know typically if you were to ask an HR specialist, he would say the right hiring, right management, right training, right, things like that. But I think, and it's possibly, as I said, the kind of variety of working life and careers options that I've had, I think, to me, being an employer of choice is what I mentioned earlier. Allowing people the space to feel respected. If I would just sum it up, the space to feel respected, the space to feel that they matter, the space to feel that they are empowered to take decisions, to act for the benefit of the organization. An employer who is, yes, demanding of high quality and high performance, but empathetic towards the employee's needs, understanding that if you do that, then you automatically create the conditions to be high quality, high performance organization, which is what we are looking at becoming.
Right. I think that is very, very well said. And that's an amazing note to end, the conversation that we've had right now. Thank you so much, Mr. Menon, for joining us and, providing the great insights that you had to give us on HR and culture.
Thanks very much, Sumant. I'm quite honored and privileged that you thought of asking me for my inputs. I hope I made sense in what I've said, but they're all from the heart, and they're all from a number of years of working and, as I said, being a finance and banking person who also tried to then become organizational behaviorist in a very small way. I don't claim to be a specialist in that. And someone who I think I'm people oriented as well. So I've been trying to put all those things together, the finance and business and running organizations and the people part together. And I think whatever I said is just a distillation of all that. I hope I made sense. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Mr. Menon. With that note, we will end this show. Make sure you check us out on our social media handles given in the description. Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you again next time.